If you're struggling with identity, finding yourself, and finding purpose, we're joined by Kevin Kapeke, who is a youth advocate and capacity builder. This is our conversation with him and his story.
Okiru.
Watching myself on TV, we'd filmed this really cool piece, and we'd been in the school that was being, I don't know if it's called trial, but reporting back on the Gonski Review, which was the research that looked into funding for schools. And we recorded for the 7:30 report, like Lee Sales, Louise Milligan, they were all there saying my name. And then come the segment, I froze. I was like, that's my voice, that's horrible. And my dad watched it, but I had to hide in the bathroom. And it took me probably months until I could see the whole clip in total.
Really?
I kept starting, pausing, squirming, and then going, try again, press play, then I'd stop, come back in a couple of weeks' time, watch it up until like a minute. It was like a 9-minute segment in total, but watching the entire 9 minutes took me about a few months to get to that point. Wow. That sense of self is still something I'm dealing with.
Yeah. It's something I'm still dealing with too. Like sometimes when I realize I made a mistake during a podcast and oh man, that time's coming up and I get these goosebumps in my belly, like, oh no, it's going to be so cringe. And then you hear it and it's just like, oh, it wasn't that bad. It wasn't that bad. But early on when we first started podcasting, there would be some words we'd say so many times and we were saying to ourselves,
I didn't realize that.
Oh, that sounds so annoying. And then you just catch yourself all the time. And I think when we initially realized that the next few podcasts, we were so intentional about what we were saying, so conscious about it. And I think those podcast episodes were really well, like, conversed, you know? So it was interesting.
I even have that at work as well. Like, I always think that I'm going to make a mistake, but then things turn out better. I'm like, if I only just put in more effort, it would have been perfect. But I had to force myself to believe in my own capabilities to do the job that I should know how to do. But anyway.
You speak a lot in your line of work. You're always up in front of the audience. And over the weekend, I saw you host the Zimbabwean T20 cricket team.
Yeah. They were obviously in the T20 World Cup. And we had never really watched cricket. I used to play cricket in primary school when I was in Zimbabwe. I was, what even was I? I'm guessing a fielder. I forget the proper terms now, but I played cricket very, very well. Then in Zimbabwe, cricket, soccer, netball. I like the Holy Trinity. We've done well in swimming as well, historically. I don't know how, but those are like the sports everyone does, and rugby too. But I was like, okay, well, cricket requires you to run. Soccer requires you to run. Netball, it's for taller people. Swimming is for a certain kind of skin tone. But cricket, I can probably do cricket. That's not too bad. And I did cricket for a few years. So then, the Melbourne cricket team came to Australia as part of the World Cup. And good experience. We called, you use your contacts, called Cameron McLeod from The Huddle, and he provided us North Melbourne's home for the night. And it was very cool. Like, it just looked great, and very good experience for them to feel like they're welcomed and part of the community. And that was probably the highlight of my 2 years as a board director for the Zimbabwean community.
Wow. So how did you get into that position to become a part of that board?
Should we press play?
We are.
Oh, you are? Oh, okay. I was like, we're getting started now.
Cheeky.
How did I get started? Gosh, that's a long story, and it's not very exciting. There came a time in 2020 when I was, having a crisis. And I use the word crisis a lot, but I really do mean I was having a crisis in terms of my own identity and place in community. And I was working at the airport. Then I was working in retail. And I remember having a conversation with one of my bosses who we had many at the airport in duty free. And they were telling me about what vision they saw for myself. And that was the first time that I had someone tell me what they thought that I could be. And not that I expected them to say to me, you'll be in Parliament or you'll be at the United Nations. They said to me, I see you being one of the directors for one of the big fashion brands in the world. And that could have made me happy because I was working in a fashion brand. Wow. I was like, oh, I don't know if I like that. I don't know if that's what I see for myself. And I've come very close to applying, and I worked for Ballet of Switzerland, the shoe store. And I'd come very close to applying for jobs in Switzerland to work at Bali, but something just kept holding me back. This is not what I need to be. This is not where I see myself going. And to hear this person tell me that they saw me being a director at a fashion house didn't sit right with me. So then I had my existential crisis, and then I was struggling, then, and I had a very good team. I was the manager of that store. I had a good team and we were all helping each other, but it was very clear that everyone there had different ambitions, and I was the only one that wasn't clear on what my ambitions were. Some wanted to go to head office. I helped them. I was the manager, so I'd sign resumes and, letter of recommendations, etc. Some wanted jobs in bigger fashion brands, and I supported that as well. I was never the manager who said, oh, I'll be out of staff, or, I'm running out. Everyone who needed to go went, and I said, use me whilst I'm here, and I'll do my best to ensure that wherever you need to go, I'll get you there. If it's Paul Smith, Gucci, Versace, I'll write it. I'll tell them how good you are. But no one was there to do that for me, because they didn't even see what my vision was. I didn't even have a vision then. Anyway, I was studying full-time whilst also working at the airport full-time for Bali. And one of my last electives was to go to India. It wasn't to go to India, but I had an elective. And there was a chance to go to India, to do that elective in India as part of the Department of... I'm forgetting the name. I will come back to the name, but they had a scholarship that they provide.
Oh, the New Colombo plan.
Yes, the New Colombo Department of Trade, Foreign Affairs and
DFAT.
Trade.
Right.
DFAT, the New Colombo plan. And the New Colombo plan had always been sold to me as a year-long experience, but I didn't have a year to give up. I was working full-time. I had a family. But then they had the short-term New Colombo, which can be up to a month. So it can be as little as a month, or it can be up to 6 months. It's like, oh, okay, I like that. I can do a month. I think I'm qualified enough to get this position. I can do a month overseas. Yeah. We got to go to India. And whilst I was there, that's when my crisis hit the peak point, and we were walking, and it's so typical to be walking in the Dharavi slums of Mumbai and have a crisis thinking, gosh, what am I doing with my life? I'm out here selling shoes and bags and things that are cool, but people here, not that they need help, but one thing that I learned was in the Dharavi slums was how from the outside we see this 2 million people living within a kilometer radius of each other or something along those lines. But whilst walking within there was ecosystems, people that were working and support haircut, barber shops, haircuts, electricians, people that were melting plastic to make other things, jewelry, people were turning stone into diamonds, whatever. Everything was happening in there. And I didn't feel a sense of I should help them, but I felt a sense of I should understand what they're doing, and perhaps this is replicable in different other communities. Right. In the Dharavi slums, you just think people just heap up in there and live in squalor conditions. Sure, that's part of it, but there was a big element of survival and schools. There was probably even a university or a TAFE institution, shopping. It felt like I was in, I don't know if you've watched Gulliver's Travels or read the book, the Lilliput. I was like in that little kingdom. It just felt so small from the outside, but inside it was like its own world. And again, I didn't feel the sense to want to help, but I felt the sense to want to understand what they were doing. So when we were walking out of there, I then saw a sewage, the water system. It wasn't clean. There was everything in there. It was a different color than what water should be. And it reminded me of the times when I was in Africa that I had malaria. And I've had malaria many times, 4 times that I recall. And I just started thinking, gosh, this is something about what I'm doing here. I even remember that vision of the water and the road and the cars that were coming this way and the slums behind me this side. Just thinking, I think this is where I need to be in this moment. I'm okay being here and I'm okay learning. I went back to Australia after, the holiday and traveling around India and a few different places as well and finishing up the course. I went back to Australia and firstly, I was in trouble because I'd extended my leave, so I had to contend with that. But secondly, I was okay resigning then. This was the December before the pandemic joined us in January. I was prepared to go work in Parliament. That was my first step of I'll go work as an electoral officer or an advisor. I'll make that my first point of call. I had applied for a few jobs. I had a few interviews lined up. And I left the airport very, very happy. I left it thinking, I know what I need to do. I don't know how I'll do it, but I do know that I need to learn something else that's not in this place. Very grateful. Like, I'm still friends with all my colleagues, all my staff. We still hang out, and all my managers in Switzerland, in Italy, and in Australia. We still have a relationship, and that means a lot to me. The pandemic came, and my interviews kind of fizzled away. The department wasn't recruiting any more people. They were trying to maintain the ones they had. So here I was now unemployed. And there was an overwhelming sense of, I need to start again. I need to like figure out. It took a while because again, they told me, it'll be over in 2 months' time. It's just the flu. It'll be over in a couple of months' time. We'll interview in April. I'd resigned in January, and I was waiting up until April. Then April came, we're in a never-ending lockdown. Things just weren't going well. And those days I wasn't leaving bed. I was staying in bed for 10, 12 hours during the day, then waking up. Like I was really having an internal crisis, just thinking, what have I done? I should have just waited and then resigned after I had JobKeeper. But I think even not having JobKeeper really got me, because I then thought, okay, you're 22 years old, get it together. You need to like get out of the house, find something. And then I went to Woolworths, and I felt as though, again, I'm 22. I should have done this when I was 14, but I need some kind of income. I need to do it fast. And that experience not only humbled me, but it was probably my best experience ever. Back again, not just say back in the streets or back in the community, but I was at Woolworths. I was doing the 5-hour shifts, trying to get it together, save $100 a week, whatever. But that experience really, really, really changed my life. I was doing things I should have done a long time ago, working with younger people, and I found myself in a leadership position very quickly. People were listening and wanting to hear what I was saying. And I'd never been in a position whereby people were listening to me in that way before. It was always me telling them what to do. We have a visual merchandising to do. We have report to do. But here I was with younger people, 14, 15, the kids who work at Woolworths, telling me, wow, you're so cool, you're so great. I love learning about this. You told me about that. And you're the nicest older person that I know here. You're like a big brother to me. And that changed everything, and the journey of being where I am today had officially started thanks to Woolworths. If I'd had JobKeeper, I probably wouldn't have I would have just stayed on JobKeeper and waited for things to come back again. But having no money and feeling stuck then changed what I needed to do. So the journey from there just kind of went uphill. That's when, the CMY, Zim community, I saw something in the on our email list, and I was like, okay, I'll apply for Zim community. They could use more young people telling them what to do. And this is pandemic time, it's uncertain times. I'm the person for that. I applied for that job. The CMY opportunity came. I was like, okay, that's cool. I'll do that to people. I can speak to community.
How did you find out about the CMY role that we're engaged on together?
Well, I'm actually much newer to the CMY world than the Kanos and the people who I've looked up to for a long time. But one thing that I made a conscious effort of when I was 22, when I'd gone back to Woolworths and doing the Zim community and a couple of other things as well that I guess we'll get to soon, was to make a LinkedIn account and begin following people. And once you follow one person who does a certain thing, the suggestions begin leaning more towards that side. And I'm someone who's very conscious of wanting to learn and wanting to hear from other people and experience what they are doing and build capacity, my own capacity that way, but also but also build others' capacity through what I'm learning. Who I am today is an accumulation of different lessons and different people who've said different things to me. So one of the things that I knew in 2020, one of the people that I knew was a young guy that I think then he was like 19, called Mohammed Semra. And I've never told him this. We don't talk often enough for me to tell him this, but he was running for council then in Maribyrnong. I think he was a 19-year-old young African guy trying to change the system. I too was running for council in Hume.
Incredible.
I was putting my name down for anything. So I made this LinkedIn account to share my videos and share my message. And I followed Mohammed. I then followed other people that I've come to idolize now or look up to or learn from. And I'm happy to share names. Again, Kano was someone who I followed earlier on. Michael Lim, Mehek Sheikh, who work together now at Vic Health. And my messaging just changed because I was learning what they were doing and how they were doing it. So CMY came through that experience of someone sharing on LinkedIn. I'm like, okay, this sounds kind of cool. I can do a youth led, whatever that means. And I was new again to youth participation, but I was like, we'll learn together, we'll experience that together. So I interviewed with Bo. I think I even met Carmel at some point. But yeah, that's just how it started. And the journey was really on a cliff then. I was just going up somehow.
Wow. I guess we've had similar stories and being connected with CMY as well, because I'm really fresh and new to the organization, like much newer. So you've already done community work in the Zimbabwean community and other associations like that. But for me, CMY was kind of my first one. Right? And I remember you inviting us to an ACME event, part of Cultureverse at the very start. And I guess our stories of migration and coming to Australia, or our families coming to Australia, are similar, right? We saw these houses, and I think we laughed about the story of how when I was younger I used to call Centrelink or the gas company on behalf of my parents. But then eventually you just stop asking your parents permission and you just pretend to be them. Say XYZ, this is my date of birth, this is what I need to do, right? And similar stories with yourself, and hearing my Vietnamese experience in Australia was very similar to a Zimbabwean experience in Australia as well.
Yeah, I think, exploring identity and belonging is such a huge thing. I'm still on that journey. I'm going to go to Japan next year to continue that journey. Somehow I think Japan will be another experience that will just overwhelm me, and I will learn something about myself. I moved to Australia in 2009, a year after my dad had moved in 2008. Back then, African migrants were moving to Australia as skilled migrants. Obviously, you've got your skilled migrants, your non-skilled migrants, your refugees, asylum seekers, etc. He was a skilled migrant. He was coming here to be a boiler maker for a company called Time and Industries. And Time and Industries was, to the best of my memory and knowledge, a company that was doing something in the mining industry, but not in the mining industry. I think it had to do with making those big trucks that carried the stuff from the mines. I've never really asked. It just was one of
services the mining industry.
Yeah, exactly. Better way of putting it. Services the mining industry. And he was here for a year. He moved here with a few other friends. He worked for a company in Africa called Zimasco. I forget what the Zimasco stands for, but something to do again with mining. Just not my area of expertise to be able to explain to you. But the recruiter from Australia came to Zimasco, and he saw the skill among these men who worked in the mines that he wanted in Australia. So he proposed that, we'd sponsor you, all of the cool things. So I had one of the better migration stories because we had a sponsor. We came here. He then moved here with his friends. So they lived in like a share house for a year or so, and the families began coming to the country. We moved here 2009 on August 24th. On Malaysian Airlines, if you would like to know. I even knew what I was wearing on that day.
MH370 or?
No, not that one. No, not that one. But I remember exactly the experience of getting on a plane, being in Malaysia, and then meeting this lady. And I still remember her, but I one day hope to find her in person. And it just showed me how small my worldview had been prior to that. And it was encapsulated at ACME as well. In Zimbabwe, I was younger. I was 11 then. Everything was large, massive. The houses were big, the streets were big, the shops were big. That's all I knew. You don't know what you don't know, I was in Malaysia at the airport with a lady who was on the same flight. She's also from Melbourne. She lives in Dandenong. But if someone tells you I live in Dandenong when you're in Malaysia, coming from Zimbabwe, it's like, okay, whatever that is. And she was from Eritrea. Again, I didn't even know what Eritrea was. I just knew what I knew, and I didn't know what I didn't know. So she just was like a foreign. She was almost alien-like to me because I'd never experienced seeing someone who was of Muslim background. I'd seen them, but there's a difference between what I had seen and what I was seeing at this point in Malaysia. Landed in Australia in my double denim. My mom had double denim too, if you would like to know. And so this journey of identity and finding belonging in this space began. I remember my first walk to the convenience store, which is a milk bar, and buying milk and thinking, milk available. It's right in front of me.
Yeah,
And here's bread available in front of me. And not to skip, but just to preface how we ended up getting to Acme, I went back to Zimbabwe in 2018 for the first time after almost 10 years here. And everything was so small. Everything was almost minutely small. And it just showed me again how my worldview had expanded, because in those 10 years, I'd been to Japan, Thailand, India, Nepal, and probably some other place I'm forgetting, and traveled around Australia as well. And I'd seen big structures and big things and temples and buildings and schools. So seeing my street again felt very, very small. So getting to Acme and having that discussion around identity and seeing those houses, it brought back memories again. And it just encapsulated my journey of trying to find where I belong, because I was seeing those tiny little houses in Acme, those visuals of people dancing, thinking, I wonder where I sit in this spectrum here, because I'm still trying to figure out if this is my identity as well. Only because when I went back to Zimbabwe, I didn't feel like I belonged there anymore. I didn't feel like this was home. And I listened to your podcast with Kano, both of you talking about not feeling like Vietnam and the Philippines were exactly home to both of you, and not sure what to do, because here in Australia, I'm African Australian. If I don't put the African, there's someone who then go, and what are you? For real.
Where are you really from?
Exactly. And in Zimbabwe, I no longer am off the streets. Like I stuck at like a sore thumb. I just didn't. My bargaining skills at the market, had dipped. My bargaining skills at a combi, which is the bus, had also dipped. I just didn't. I just felt like, again, I was in Lilliput and I was the massive man in a small place. Yeah.
Incredible. Wow. The story of Kevin Kapeke.
The story of Kevin.
Ever evolving.
Of course. And look, for myself, almost 30 years now, and it's each and every day you grow. But you grow with the identity of where you've come from, where your parents have come from, and all those generations, into a world that we are really creating and pushing and shoving and pushing and feeling as well. So we're dancing with the world around us. So we're growing each and every day. And I'm guessing that's the same for you, Jasper, isn't it? Unfolding identities.
Unfolding identities and growing each day. I think there's something that's always stuck in me. You told me this. I mentioned something about this podcast, and you said this phrase, in your growth phase, and you were like, we're always growing. And that always stuck with me. And I was like, oh man, I can't believe I said that. I didn't realize I had a bit of ego in me that I wasn't growing anymore. And that I've always been reminded of that, like, damn, I am always growing. We are always becoming and finding our identities, right? I have that question, do we ever really find out who we are? Or is that just a growing development, Because since we're always ever changing, our bodies are changing like every 3 months or something like that. So we're not the same person every time that we think. So,
and I guess as well, that's why I get jealous of people who do understand exactly who they are. I've got a friend who's from regional Victoria. He knows exactly where he's from, exactly what his place in the world is, and exactly what his parents, like, he gets it. And I get jealous of that, pleasure of knowing exactly what you know, and being content all the time, because I still struggle. Should I live here forever? Should I go back to Africa? Should I go somewhere else? All those questions are still in my head, but I'm like, I'm not a jack of all trades or a master of none. I'm not, nowhere is home. I'm just a person that's lived in different places. So
it's interesting that you mentioned that, because the youth-led unit, at one point I wanted to name it Third Culture or Third Culture Kid. Right? Because you were born in Zimbabwe, that was your first culture. You've come to Australia, and that's your new culture, but you're stuck in between. So that's that third culture as well. You're Zimbabwean Australian, or if somebody asks you where you're from or what's your heritage, what do you say, and how do you answer that question?
Good question. Honestly, I don't think I've nailed that perfectly yet. Some people get annoyed if I say Zimbabwean Australian, because we're all Australian. I'm like, yeah, I know, but it's not really how people perceive that. I've always said African Australian. I'm not sure if I've nailed it, if that feels comfortable to me just yet, but it is what it is. That's what I say on paper. Yeah, it used to just be Zimbabwean, but then you get a citizenship and things change. It's never just been Australian, but I think I'm working towards that. I also feel like I'm someone who's I shouldn't say patriotic, because I think the tendency, people then think wildly of someone I'm a patriotic person. The connotations are not great.
Yeah.
But I'm someone who's always about a sense of country and a sense of belonging. Even back in Zimbabwe, I didn't fight in the Civil War. I didn't fight in the independence struggle, but I value the flag. I value what it stands for. I value the leadership all the time. Regardless of who's in power, I'm someone who's very attuned to what's going on around me politically. So I hope I can earn and feel comfortable to one day say that I am just Australian, and that's okay, and I've contributed enough. I think I'm trying to. That's why all these board positions, community volunteering stuff all happens. That's my desire to want to build enough capacity to then say, he did all right. He's a good Australian.
Australian. We are all Australian, right?
Yeah.
Despite our colour and what we look at like, really. And I find it so beautiful that I can have a chat to you about your story and coming to Australia. And my story is a bit different, where my parents are refugees and they came over by boat via a Malaysian refugee camp, right? But I'm still Australian. And your family have come over through the Philippines, and from a family member coming here first and sponsoring you over. You're Australian as well, right? The people who are already here, well, this is a hard topic, right? I don't really want to go into this, but they are obviously Australian. But the people who came in here, who colonized it, they're Australian as well, right? So we come by so many flavors and tastes and colors and smells. It's beautiful, this fabric of multiculturalism, right? And I guess when I speak about this, when I speak to you and the rest of our youth-led unit about it, it is so inspiring to hear these stories of everyday people who carry incredible heritage and history behind them to make Australia what it really is right here and right now.
I think sometimes I just am not strong enough. I'm just too tired of having to explain things. I don't think I'm there yet. I acknowledge my learning journey. I'm not there yet to be able to defend my Australianness all the time. It gets very exhausting, and I'm not someone that I don't acknowledge how tired I am from having to justify that I'm Australian or that I'm not, or I justify my identity. I acknowledge the journey that I've got to go, but the lessons learned are sometimes heavy, and it's not something that I am always ready to just say, okay, here we go, let's dive into that again. It takes time and effort and energy, and I'm not sure that I have that all the time. Someone who I listen to does talk about the heavy burden of being an advocate or of being, an ally in the space, not whether you have the lived experience or you're just an ally through, understanding others' perspectives. It's a big job, and it's a tiring job sometimes, and this is a safe space to say that, but not all spaces are like this, So, it's a learning journey.
Do you have to defend your Australianness?
I haven't for a long time, because I think I'm at a better place in terms of understanding who my community looks like and who it is. I don't veer a lot. I'm always, on a learning journey, and I always understand the place of maximum learning and not being in the danger zone. However, I'm not in places often now where that discussion is one where I have to defend myself. I think I'm fairly insulated and protected. And every so often I try to go in the danger zone and see, what's out there, go to areas where I'm not, not to, again, stereotypical, but being in a pub, for example, is a place that I'm not super familiar with, and I'm not sure that I'd be the same version of Kevin you're talking to today. Being at a football game is an era that's different. Difference between cricket and football, by the way, in terms of difference in crowds at those places. So I think I'm insulated enough now, and I feel safe enough now to be comfortable with where I'm at.
So where did your family land when they got to Australia? I guess, did your mother come over here as well?
Yes. So my immediate family got to move here, and again, just looking at the asylum seeker situation in this country, I have an enormous amount of privilege that I've come from to even just get here in one piece with my entire family intact. That's something that not everyone gets to experience. So my dad was here for a year. He prepared a house. It was it was a physical structure. I don't know about calling it a house. It was a structure that stood the test of the weather, but it didn't have a lot that it needed, but it was fine. That's the first house we came to. And honestly, again, coming from such a small way of life and it was massive to me. So we landed in Melbourne. So we're here in Melbourne, lived in Reservoir for those first few years, maybe 3 or 4 in that building structure. And honestly, it was fine to me. The convenience store was close by, the school was close by, there was a few people that I knew. I had the typical Greek nana who lived next door who made me and my sister and my brother food, a lot of food. I had Indian neighbors on the other side. I really lived that quintessential you in Australia life now. That desire to want to better ourselves didn't change until, at least for myself, to tell my parents we need to move to a better house or whatever. It didn't change until I walked home with my school colleague one day, and she made a comment when she got to our house. I'd never thought about it. I'd never really pictured that we lived in a particular condition. And she said, "Oh, I didn't know that you guys were poor." And I think we're both in like year 9. Then I'm thinking, oh, I guess we are poor. Look at this place. And then that journey, I think we were in that house for a couple of more months at that point. It really was. The planks were still standing, so thank God. But it was coming undone. It was It was a typical older weatherboard type house. And I was happy there. That comment changed my persuasive skills. My parents said, let's try be better and move on maybe to the outer suburbs, more like Mernda in the newer estates. Let's try go to the next place. But I was always happy in those first few years in Australia, in Melbourne. Very privileged. I used to go for Essendon Football Club then. That was the first football match that I saw on TV. We used to watch Channel 7 only because that's the TV channel that I turned on when we first turned our TV on. And it just becomes like the staple. You eventually diversify your viewing habits and you're like, oh, ABC or SBS. Black people on TV. Oh, I didn't know there were people like that out here. But always came from enormous privilege, even in our situation.
So as a 10-year-old Kevin Kapeke turning on Channel 7 for the first time and seeing the footy, AFL, and I guess
Homes and Gardens, and Friday night. I think it was Friday night.
Home and Away, all of their shows.
Yes, Home and Away.
Well, what were you thinking when you saw Black people for the first time on the ABC or SBS? The people who look like you, who represent you, who share the same stories as you.
Well, again, the learning journey, observing that I'm not someone who's for representation for the sake of representation. It has to be in safe, clear spaces. I acknowledge that sometimes you can just plonk someone on TV and you create a very toxic environment for them. When you talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, you have to create an equitable space for them to want to then feel included. So don't just plonk someone there for the sake of doing that. I remember reading, it must have been Neighbours, I forget which show it was, and I think I feel like saying it was the First Nations character who talked about environment on Neighbours that wasn't safe for them. It wasn't a culturally safe space for them. Like, what does that mean, a culturally safe space? And that, I think that's the E in the diversity and inclusion in terms of thinking, what does equality for the sake of equality is not good. People need different things and you have to be very clear and conscious of that. And this young man who was just plonked on the widest show on TV needed there to be a cultural understanding of what he needed to do, the support he needed to have, because it's a lot of pressure and, the social media and everything. So not everyone deserved the same thing. So I'll just park that there. So in terms of seeing people on TV, I idolized. I think Majak Daw was the first football player that I saw going onto the field. Was his experience good? Perhaps it was, but there's always allegations of racism. I saw the First Nations people who played for, I think it was Hawthorn, and it's really interesting now looking at the saga that's happening and that situation there. So I feel very torn as I'm sitting here thinking the representation mattered to me. However, it wasn't a safe space for them. So I hope that in trying to get to a position where I'm the first Black person here or the first Black person there or the first to do this, I hope it's safe for me, because I'm a very fragile person. I'll burst into tears or just walk away. But it meant a lot. It meant a lot seeing them there. It meant a lot. I think on the ABC, maybe SBS, there were dime a dozen TV shows that looked much more familiar to me. I watch a TV show now called Taste the Nation by Padma Lakshmi, who's an American chef, and she goes around America tasting different foods. And that concept is one, and I just watched the episode yesterday with my dad, and that concept is one that is very familiar to me. I'm used to watching MasterChef. We haven't even had a single Black chef. I'm like, can no one cook? Has none of us applied? My mom, just go do something, why? And with no offense to the more established communities, it's the usual Asian and Asian fusion and European and Eurocentric methods. So my community still has a long way to go. I sometimes hate that we're the first ones. Not the first ones here, but we're on that first trajectory of migration in the sense of in the past 20, 30 years. I wish I'd come later and just enjoyed the fruits of others' labor. But sadly, we have to be the first in certain instances. But it meant a lot seeing them.
Yeah. So you're with the trailblazing community then?
I don't know about being with them. I'm holding on to to their garments and just hoping they drag me with them.
So how can organizations make places and spaces safer for young multicultural or for multicultural people in general?
Well, as you asked that, the fear in my heart, it's a heavy topic. And when the person, Veronica Prado is her name, great person to look up to, when she did this talk at my workplace a little while back, and she said it's a heavy topic, I didn't really believe her, because I'm not usually confronted by the realities of colonial structures and things that are here because the Caucasian community want them to be there to stay the way they are. So it's a heavy one to talk about, how to create equitable spaces for different people. She explained through a diagram, I forget the name of the diagram, but it essentially, if you can visualize it, it has 3 circles. Each circle is, so the first circle is one, and then the second one is over the other one, then the last one is a much bigger one. In the middle circle, the very first one is green. It's called the safe zone. It's where most of us survive, and we live there. You don't veer outside of your control. You go to work, you go back home, you have your dinner with your friends, and the hardships of other communities, the asylum community, the migrant communities, you don't see them because you see exactly what's curated for you. You watch Netflix, you watch your Taste the Nation shows, and you're like, oh, diversity, great, it's over there, it's not over here with me. I'm just here, I live in the inner city. And then you have your learning zone, which is outside of that. Sometimes you veer into the learning zone, then back into your safe zone. Maybe you go on a train, oh my gosh, diverse people on a train, and burqas and hijabs and etc. And you learn different things, etc. And sometimes you go to a class maybe, or you have a diversity workshop at work, diversity, equity, inclusion. We're the big organization, we're doing all of these things, and you learn. Then you go back to your safe zone. I'm an ally, I support you, you're a diverse person here, we've got a prayer room, I hope that's enough. Do you know what I mean? That learning, and then going back to your safe zone. Then there's a danger zone as well, which is whereby you do too much and you go over and you end up in danger, whether you're perceived as racist because you're doing certain things, or you're in areas that definitely aren't safe for you, and you end up in the red zone. So it's the green, yellow, and the red. You end up in this dangerous zone where, like, my gosh, there's been a racist, a discrimination thing that's happening around here. I don't know how to handle that. I'm panicking, and you're now in danger. The point of maximum learning is between the learning zone and the danger zone. It's right on the border, whereby you aren't in the danger zone, but you're learning and you're seeing the danger. It's one where you're exposed to the visuals of what's happening in the third world countries, and you're learning. You're not in the floods in Pakistan, but you're learning, and you understand exactly what to do as an ally. You're not in the famine in Somalia, but you're learning. You're not in the safe zone. You're between the learning zone and the danger zone. It's a lot of pressure to want to ask someone what they can do to be a better ally or to be someone who supports diverse communities. You have to learn to be uncomfortable. That's what I've been taught by Veronica. Listening to her, you have to learn to be okay with being uncomfortable, right? Because finding comfort in what you know doesn't provide any learning. So it's about asking the questions. It's about trying to figure out, we're looking at diversity, equity, and inclusion. What does that look like in reality for a person? How can we put ourselves in their life? What's their point of difference? What can we do to ensure that we are providing the best, safest space for a person that we can? And I don't have the lessons here with me, but one thing that I picked up in my journey of learning is that it's okay to still be learning, and it's okay to ask for assistance. I still ask for assistance.
Of course.
I've had people reach out to me and express racial vilification cases. I'm thinking, I don't know what to do either. I might be the black person here, the only one in this, but I don't know what to do. And I'm going to go ask for assistance, and we'll find an equitable solution that benefits all, where we can also learn too, because it's a learning journey here.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what can organizations do? There's a lot of learning to do. There's a lot of representation for the sake of representation in organizations that aren't safe for people to just be paddling in. So we need to learn. We need to learn at a systematic level as well, not just for those who deliver programs or for just the managers to be the one. We all need to learn and understand what system we live in and what role we have to play. I'm always fascinated by organizations, and I think everyone does that now. At the bottom of the application form for a job, they say, we welcome, Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islanders, employees and migrant communities to apply. We welcome everyone to apply. And I'm thinking, okay, that's good that you welcome everyone. But what structures do you have in place to really welcome those people? We can't just do Diwali and give the snacks when time comes during the month, or do Africa Day and do the snacks. What are we doing as an organization to break those barriers, the colonial structures that have been set in place to ensure that those people from those communities do feel like they're part of the fabric? Do you have a First Nations action plan in place? And everyone just says, we're sure you welcome them. Do you have an action plan that tackles the injustices of First Nations communities? Who are you learning from? Who is driving the car? The analogy that she gave was one about driving the car, whereby you can't have a driver in a car who doesn't know where we're going. You can't have a driver in a car who doesn't have a clear picture of where we're going. I feel like my organization understands where we're going. Hence, we're on this learning journey together. But not every organization understands where you're going. So who's in that driver's seat? Who is the conductor? Who's got dibs in the front row of the car? Because we're all in the back seat, hoping you're taking us to the better place. But if we're driving a car that the driver isn't sure where we're going, we are not going to do well by people who need the assistance, who are sitting in the back.
So this is incredible, your learnings from the past, 2-3 years since COVID.
Wow.
Right? This is a lot of depth and internalized lived experience that you have, that you could share and process that and articulate that first and foremost. So look, incredible to have you on here and share those stories, right? But I guess I want to dive deep into who you are, especially in your moment of crisis. What helped you rise up? Because Okiru stands for rise up in Japanese. And I guess we've all got our stories of rising up as well. And Jasper can share his story in a second later as well. But I'd like to, what did you do to become so resilient, to get yourself out of bed as that 22-year-old, to not just accept mediocrity, if we want to call it that?
Yeah, no, you can call it that. I like that word. I okirued, I guess. I rose up. I okirued at a certain point, I guess in April, when in reflection now, there are two things that were very, very apparent to me then that I know now, and I try to live my life by doing those things here. I had no one to ask for help. number one. I had no one that I could reach out to, or so I thought, right? I'm like, here I am. We live in Craigieburn now. I'm a Craigieburner. And I was waking up, nothing to do, nowhere to go. We were in lockdowns, we couldn't do much, struggling. And then I think again, February, March, April, we were again in that early onset of COVID. Nothing was happening in the job application stage. And then I thought, I'm going to ask for help. I'm going to ask for assistance. My mom was the first one. And again, I was already back at Woolworths, so I was okay with starting again. I wasn't even embarrassed by going back to Woolworths and going back into retail after I tried to pivot away from that. I was okay starting again. My mom asked me to do this course in mental health because there were jobs in mental health and aged care. And I was like, fine, we'll do it. It's all right. So I did the course under the free TAFE program. Thank God for that, because I had no cash. And by the time that I finished that, I had reached out to my member of parliament, Maria van Vakenu, the member for Cornwall. And I was part of a youth subcommittee. It was called the Cornwall Youth, what was it called? Gosh, these advisory committees, there's been many now. I think it was called the Cornwall Youth Advisory Committee. And we were just basically advocating on a couple of different things in our localized area that we could change and we could, champion. And she helped me, and she helped us have a country night for Zimbabwe and talk about Zimbabwean culture, share some food. And she came along, and people were part of people in the community, not just my community, but Caucasian people, Indian people, people who live within Cornwall were enjoying these opportunities to hear and learn as well. And then she offered me a job as an elected officer. I think it was 2 days a week. Amen. You're happy to be employed to do her community engagement work. We were now in lockdown. We were struggling in lockdown, and she wanted someone to assist, running town forums and town halls, things we'd never really done online before. So pivoting onto Zoom. We have an aging population in my community as well. We have migrant communities in my community. We have, I think, some of the largest numbers of asylum seekers living in Hume. One of the most diverse communities in the country, full stop. And we were struggling then, and there had to be this great partnership with council and state government. All levels of government had to kind of band together. And our little part as a federal government, being that health is a state government thing, or at least public health, etc., we were doing these forums with doctors talking about vaccines. I remember one thing in particular, and I'll just mention it just as a learning experience too, had to do with a particular time where the Greek community who watch Greek news on the TV, because SBS offers you everything. And the one particular vaccine, the AstraZeneca vaccine, wasn't having the best effects in Europe at that time. And this had an effect on people here who were saying, oh, why would I get that vaccine if it's not working for people in Europe? Are you trying to kill us? Are you trying to, you're not researching properly? And that then involved getting doctors involved, people from the council involved, people from the Multicultural Commission involved. It was a very tough time. But the reflection that I have then was that Maria helped me and gave me that platform. And from then on, things just kind of spiraled in terms of being able, feeling comfortable to ask for help and feeling comfortable to learn from people. Capacity building should be my middle name, not because I do it well, but because I'm trying to be a capacity builder as well. I know the power of having someone write you a recommendation letter, from Maria being the first one. I even remember then going to Cultiverse. I had a good reference too for that from Maria's office. From Cultiverse to where I work now at Vic Health, I had a good reference for that too. It means a lot to me now in my state, people to believe in me, that they'll write letters for me, recommend me, and that mentorship is very, very important. One of my mentors is the Vice Chancellor for Toby University, Professor John Jua. Incredible person. And to even, we plan our meetings with his assistant like 6 months in advance. That's how busy he is. You have to like put in your half an hour 6 months in advance. And that, I'm like, gosh, it's not that I can't acknowledge this feedback from someone else, but it means a lot coming from the Vice Chancellor of the university to believe in me, to give me the reference to run for a board position. They don't know, because Perhaps they do. They don't know what that means for a person like me to get that support. For my CO at Viscount to provide that means a lot to me. So to be in my position now where people are asking me for a reference, I'm thinking, yes, I'll give it to you. I did it in retail, I'll do it now because I know the power that has on changing someone's life.
Wow.
So what does belief mean for you, Jasper?
Belief.
Yeah. Somebody believing in you. And for me, you're right, as a young person going through your career and saying, hey, this guy has it. Let's help him out. We can see potential. We can see limitless. We can see this person grow. Obviously, it's selfish, right? They can help me do my job, and then we'll elevate him so that he can help me, but also we're investing in his skills and his power as well. And that gives you confidence. What I'm saying here is that gives you confidence to just be able to do more, to get out there, to put your name out there, to walk from the comfort zone into, what was that next zone?
Oh, the learning zone.
The learning zone, and like dancing,
and
dancing and teasing and weaving with the danger zone as well, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think it's important. Like, I feel like I can relate to your story of, there was a point in my life when I completed my uni, and after that I was trying to find a job, right, in design. I couldn't find a job. I was doing nothing for like almost 2 years, right? I was sleeping at like 4 a.m. playing video games, and then waking up and rinse and repeat, because I didn't know what I wanted to do with life. And that change happened was when I started to watch like motivational videos on YouTube, right? Every morning I started with that. And it'll be like Joe Rogan or someone like say, hey, wake up at 5 a.m., do this, do that. And it was so uncomfortable. I was going to sleep at 5 a.m. And these guys saying, wake up at 5 a.m. I'm like, what am I supposed to do? How do I do that? So it was a process. How can I just get to the gym, right? How can I just get there and build the capacity to get that under my belt? And it started from going to the gym at 10 a.m. till then going at 11 p.m. And I was finding, all right, like, this is not good for me. I'm getting too tired. And I was going to gym like 2-3 times a week for 3 hours a day, right? And then it got to a point where, how can I develop a system where I can follow these guys who are saying, get up at 5 a.m. and start doing stuff that where you want to go, right? I really want to be a designer. That's why I didn't want to find jobs at like warehousing or retail or anything like that. But my parents were like saying, dude, like, you're doing nothing, you're just sleeping, you're playing games, like, find a job. But I'm like, man, I really want to do this. I'll have clients sometimes to do stuff, but it'll be like once every 6 months or something. So it wasn't efficient. And I lost that belief in myself, right? And it was just developing the system, getting uncomfortable. All right, I gotta start waking up at 5 a.m., 4 a.m. and getting in the position where I start the day strong. And in order to do that, you have to develop a system. Like, what can I do to kind of trigger my brain? All right, do this. Right. Have your clothes on when you go to sleep, or have the clothes set aside right next to your bed. And once you see that, it's like, all right, it's a trigger. I need to go to the gym. And I was doing that really consistently, and it got real comfortable. And then for times past, when you get comfortable with something, you can kind of start to fall back, go backwards. And you have to find ways to develop uncomfortable habits, challenging yourself. There's an importance in challenging yourself, right? Because then you see how much you can grow, how much your capacity is. So, like, I really resonate with that, you know?
And it takes time.
It takes a lot of time.
It takes a lot of time.
It takes a lot of time, man. But it's incredible to see at such a young age to... Wait, how old are you, if you don't mind me?
25.
25, right? I got my first job at 24, and it's not a great job. It's a warehousing job, right? But it started somewhere, you know? And I didn't have that vision still. I was like, all right, at least I can earn money every day. And then luckily enough, like, we're here because Gerald just asked me a question. Like, hey, you want to start something? And we're here today, right? But it was a big step to grow to the position I'm in now, because if you knew me a few years back, I was a completely different person. I was timid. I was so quiet. I was so shy, and I had no self-confidence. And I'm building to become even more confident now, to become a better communicator. But I had to get uncomfortable, right? We were discussing before, what was it like you know, the first podcast, it was so messy. We were so uncomposed. And we're developing skills to get better. But you do that through the reps, right? And constantly getting uncomfortable, like hearing your voice. You have to listen to that so that you can really analyze, you know, look into the reflection and be like, how can I improve? And sometimes you have to hurt yourself. Like, oh, I was saying this. I gotta change that habit, you know? So there's a lot of value in that uncomfortable zone of life.
And you know, the one thing that's consistent there is that idea of being surrounded by other people. And in our culture, in African culture, we really do believe that it takes a village to raise someone. And within it, there's people in the village as well, you know. Surrounding yourself with a high-performing team is very important. Even if they're not high-performing, if they at least are trying to perform, that's good enough. Having colleagues who are people that, you know, get you going all the time. I always feel motivated when I have dinner with people that I know. The discussion will just be great because I get motivated. Someone was telling me something that I might never do, but at least just hearing it, it's like, oh, that's really cool, about, you know, monetizing our voices on a podcast or on YouTube, and building that consultancy of people saying, hey, I want that person to talk to my people. I'll pay him to fly here and do what he needs to do. I talk to Kano and I have dinner with Kano, and it's all about, again, using our story to benefit community. And that you only get if you surround yourself with people who are also on that journey with you and willing to try. And in my community, it's taken some time to find those people because we've, you know, as Zimbabwean people, our faith in the system is generally shaken. People who come from authoritative countries that don't respect democracy, you give up on the system, you give up on your voice being heard in the system. So to say that I'm the first person to do this is only because no one else wants to, they won't even try. So having people around me, much like yourself, who are going to ask you those questions and challenge you and make you feel uncomfortable sometimes, has been a great learning experience. So I resonate with that.
You mentioned like you want to find yourself, right? Build your identity, and you go on to Japan. Well, what are you expecting to find there?
Listen, I tried to find myself in many places. Perhaps I just never will find myself anyway. The journey did begin in India, and that point at that intersection, the road intersection, is still one that is ingrained in my brain. After that, I went to Europe recently in April on my first annual leave from work. I get the whole 4 weeks. It's a privilege to be paid to be away on holiday. And I went to Europe with another organization that I'm on the board for. But I extended my stay in Europe then to just, you know, enjoy a few other countries. So my friend in Belgium, my other not even a friend, my other people, it's a person that I knew. I'm trying to like put people that I knew, just I'll meet you, let's just show me around. In Italy, my aunt was in Turkey, I've got some family in the UK as well. So I was never alone. My boss also gave me some contacts, some very cool people in Switzerland and Belgium too. Cool. So I constantly had people to talk to and, you know, and have along the journey. I wanted to find myself. I had a vision from Instagram of places that I wanted to go and see if I can feel something in those places. I think it's called Louboutin, which is in Switzerland. I wanted to go there. I got there, but I didn't really see Kevin. I just saw some green and waterfalls and nice trains, and that was fine. I got closer to that in Turkey, which my experience in Turkey was one that was not the easiest one. You know, my aunt is there working, not doing too well financially. She left Zimbabwe, and it was a harsher reality to be like, oh my gosh, this is not the holiday that I dreamt of, but it's okay. We're here in the moment. I had a better time in Europe in terms of seeing other versions of my family with the English accent. Oh, wow, you're Zimbabwean with your accent? No way. And that was much closer to like, okay, I'm in here somewhere. I saw two of my aunts and their young children, even grown children have got the typical British accent. And even that was I'm closer. But I came back without a bag. So I lost part of myself in Europe because I physically left my bag in Europe. And now I want to go to Japan just to, again, keep learning whether it's cultures, personalities, people. I've been to Japan before as an exchange student when I was in year 8. Back then, my dad just signed me up for anything that related to me getting out there and, speaking, debating, going to Japan. I did that. I had a very good host mom and host siblings in Japan. A great learning experience. Again, learning other cultures, things you can't do in your own circle. You have to be in the danger zone sometimes to learn these things. Coming from Zimbabwe, things are so small. I was in Australia, things became so big. I went to Japan, they became even bigger. You've got Disneyland and super long buildings and fast bullet trains. So your world is expanded exponentially, and the same happened in India as well. So perhaps it's not finding myself, but it's just finding more that I can learn from and learn, to build capacity in certain areas. Even in Europe, like getting trained from, Belgium to Switzerland, it was just such a cool experience that I hadn't had before. We have metro here, and that lets you down sometimes, but I wasn't let down. I wasn't let down by the Italo between Venice and Florence. Like, it was very efficient, and just that experience of living through those moments meant a lot to me. So I don't know what I'll find in Japan aside from good food and good company, but I will learn something and I'll bring that back and make that fit into my way of living.
Amazing.
So what's interesting, what I'm hearing is that you're trying to find yourself by looking elsewhere, going to Europe and meeting all these people.
I know. It's such a...
So you're chasing the external, but what do you do in terms of introspection? Do you look within? Do you have meditative practices? Do you write? And in addition to that, tell me about burnout as well, because you're a budding politician, you're on multiple boards, you work full-time for Vic Health, and you do incredible community engagement, right? Tell me about your time and your energy.
Listen, we're African, the day is as long as you want the day to be. My day just keeps going. It never really ends. You got to do what you got to do, I think perhaps if I was another culture, I'd feel burnout more. Do I feel it? Yes, and we'll get to that. But I think that watching my mom do night shift and then go to school during the day makes me feel invincible. I can work through the night and work in the morning, then work again, If my mom can do it and my dad can, then I can too. It's no problem. So that's number one. Number two, again, the day is as long as I'd like it to be. It is very well planned. I'm a very calendar person. I'm driving 20 minutes. I need 10 minutes to walk to the office. I need that. Like, it's very, very particular. And I'm still late. Yes. Well, the lateness, it's part of my DNA. I think Black people, and being late, it's I will do a study one day. It's in there somewhere.
Shout out to Sherry Rose.
Yes. We're very similar in being late to most places. But no, that's in our DNA. We'll get to that. However, I enjoy a planned day. I enjoy doing as much as I can, learning as much as I can, and experiencing as much as I can. I enjoy this. If I wanted to sleep on the Saturday and Sunday, I wouldn't be here. I enjoy this. I enjoy going from here, going to my colleague's house and talking about a startup we want to do. That takes time. That takes effort. I enjoy being part of committees that are doing very good things to build capacity of young people and understand what's happening out there in the world. And I don't want to spoil things that we're working for next year for different committees that I'm on, but it's a thrill to be a part of these experiences. Now, introspectively, I could meditate more. I'm not going to lie about that. I've used the Smiling Mind app I think they've got guided meditation classes. That's just not an African thing generally. It's been a learning experience to even be calm enough to sit for a while and just meditate. Maybe not a Zimbabwe thing, I don't know about other countries, but I know my community, we don't meditate. We're doing it now. These holidays mean a lot as well. This traveling, this exploring, etc. Do I look internally enough? Probably not. And you're right, it does seem a bit opposite to be looking for myself outside, which is why I'm saying perhaps I just want to keep learning and keep bettering myself. Perhaps I'm fearful of what's inside. I don't know. Maybe I'm just not as good as I think I am. Or maybe I'm better than I think I am, and that's even more pressure. So,
That's interesting. Meditation, formally, it is a sit down, eyes closed practice, but it doesn't have to be like that.
Well, I do sleep, so so we'll do close the eyes.
So what does spirituality mean in the African continent?
That's religion.
It's religion, I think, but also it doesn't have to be.
You're right
as well.
I think, and again, colonial structures are responsible for this. I think as Africans in general, and I say this expecting the wrath of the elderly community, separating spirituality and religion is not something we do well. We've kind of put them together, and it's just either church where the spirit is and nothing at all. So being in touch with your spirit or your inner self or your sense of self is now intertwined with religion. For better or for worse, it's just what it is, right? I grew up in a church. You know, I've been in church. I was baptized. I think I've been Catholic. I've been Pentecostal. I've been something else. I've experienced that spectrum of churches, and church is a big thing of being African. And it's a colonial structure. You know, whether we agree or not, the missionaries brought that to Africa. We were something else before. We're something else now. It is what it is. So my connection to spirituality would have to have always been praying and reading the Bible. And sometimes it depresses you more than it does motivate you. But that's where spiritually we have found ourselves to be. And the journey of separating that from religion, not because I want to leave religion behind, because I just want to know who I am outside of a structure that was designed for me to understand who I am, is taking longer than it should.
So I find stillness in nature as well. So I know we spoke about this previously. Let's go on this hiking thing and go receive the energy from Mother Nature. But moving on, and I guess as we close up this discussion, I'd love to find out what's next for Kevin Kapeke. I guess in the past few years you were lost. You weren't sure of the direction that you could go, and now the world is so big, it's so open, and you've got this power and the community to back you and all these references, right? Where do you want to go?
Well, I acknowledge the power part, and it's one that's taking some time. But when you have influence and you're able to make a phone call and make things happen, you know that you have some level of power, and you've got a job that pays well. That's privilege as well. So power and privilege are things that even in my state right now, I acknowledge that I have, and I'm happy to use them to the best that I can. I want to continue learning. I want to go back to school. I want to, whatever I study, I don't even know. I want to continue bettering my relationships with my mentors. I've got a very good group of people that I can reach out to for support. We're doing great work with the Africa's Got Talent in our African community. That's a big part of my sense of community, building the capacity of those young people. We just won an award at the Youth Impact Award at the Brimbank Awards a couple of weeks ago. And gosh, I want to explore that word capacity building as much as I can, whatever that means. I want to explore what helping other young migrant people find work looks like and find purpose in society. When we started Africa's Got Talent, the young people, I shouldn't say I wasn't a part of the team, then I inherited this project. The young people that did Africa's Got Talent back then, found that young African Australian individuals did not have a sense of they didn't feel like part of the team. They didn't feel like part of this community. So this idea was then grown to put on a talent show and highlight the best of African culture, whether it's through music, arts, acting, drama, whatever that looks like, food, etc. And then not only empower our community, but educate the rest of the community as to what our superpower is. And that stuck with me. That's why I joined that team as a director on the for Africa's Got Talent to the Africa Day Australia organization, because building capacity of those young people to feel confident to stand on stage and sing their national anthem, to dance, to play, to cook food, to be in videos, it means a lot to them. It might not have meant a lot to Maria to give me that reference all those years ago. Might not have meant a lot to my CEO to give me a reference for me to do a course, but it meant a lot to me. So whilst it might seem minute to me that I'm doing I'm part of this team that helps young people in the arts find their space in community, I know it means a lot to them. So that's a big part of what I want to continue building, exploring what the, building capacity really looks like within a community, and embedding that in equity frameworks, ensuring that we're not setting up these young people to fail. We have a lot of them that are growing up here. We have a lot of them that aren't participating in society. There's been false rhetoric around African gangs, etc., racial vilification of young African Australian males in particular, and that narrative needs to shift. And I'm someone that's tries to be very localized in what I do. The bigger picture is one thing, but I'm happy to help one person, and just that one person can help someone else. I'm overwhelmed by the idea of 50,000 Zimbabweans living in this state. I'm like, oh, that's too many. It's fine to do in this country, sorry. That I just want to help the couple that I help. When I ran for council, I lost. That's not a surprise. When I ran for council, I was happy to have lost, but that journey was built from a young African man having approached me to talk about wanting to play football professionally. And I realized there's no framework that I can support him from. We've got no one that we know that can provide him the support. We've got nowhere to go to ask for support and assistance. What could I possibly do in my position as a young person in Hume City Council to help this young man to play sport the way that he wants to? Let's run for council. That's how that came up. So I'd like to spend my next few years exploring what capacity building looks like.
That's incredible.
Wow.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
And one of the things that us at Okiru have been wanting to do, and it's similar, and we came up with the tagline, help people become masters of their own universe. And capacity building is exactly the same as that, right? Yeah. And it's about leaving impact for just one person, because one person is that difference as well. So look, I'm very happy and honored that we're sharing the same path and we're walking together as well in all the work that we do. And I guess thank you for coming on and sharing your story as well. But before we wrap up, we like to end our podcast with 3 questions, and I'll let Jasper take on this.
Okay. You ready? What are you grateful for?
I'm grateful for help. I have a lot of help. I have a lot of support, and I'm very, very, very grateful for everything that's been provided for me. It takes time, effort, patience, learning, kindness on people's part to, again, be here and share this with new audiences. This is help. I'm grateful for this. I'm grateful for all the help.
What have you realized?
I've realized that it's very easy to make space at a table for someone else to join as well. If the table has 8 chairs, that's not because that's what we can see. You can always scooch over. I'm someone that firmly wants to drag everyone along with me, for better or for worse. If I'm on a forum, we're doing it together. I'll just scooch over and make space for you to join over here. So the old saying that, if you're not at the seat at the table, you're on the menu, is very true. So I try not to be on the menu. I want to be in the chair deciding what's on the menu, as opposed to being on the menu myself and being talked about without me being present. I'm the kind of person who, if there's no space at the table, I'll bring a folding chair and I'll make myself comfortable by the side and also listen and contribute my 2 cents. So the table analogy, if there's space, make space for someone else. If there's no space, bring your folding chair. And if you're not on the chair, you're on the menu. So you have to decide. And that's the danger zone sometimes, and the learning zone. Balancing that spectrum is very important. So
wow, that's beautiful.
Before we move on to the next question, what do you mean by if you're not at the table, you're on the menu? Can you dive deeper into that?
Well, we have a lot of situations, whether it's been government, local, state, federal, where communities are talked about, but we're not on the table. We're not at the table. We're usually on the menu. We're being talked about as, what can we do to help the hard to reach communities? What can we do to help the, to help the new and emerging? I'm like, gosh, we've been new and emerging. It's been 12 years. I've emerged. I'm here. I cannot still be new and emerging. And you talk about hard to reach. We have the instances not an incident, the happenstance that happened with COVID and the locking down of towers in North Melbourne. How is that hard to reach? It's in North Melbourne. That's the closest we can get to Spring Street, where Government House is. So it's not hard to reach. You're just not reaching them. They're hardly reached, as some people always teach me as well. So I feel that if we aren't at the table also advocating for these issues, we're being talked about on the menu like you would in a restaurant. That's why they either make space for you, and if they don't, bring your own folding chair.
I love it.
Yeah, it's amazing. I've never heard that before. Last question. What is the question you ask yourself?
Oh, I know the question. I definitely knew the question. I know the question I asked myself as soon as you said it. I'm just trying to think if that's enough. The question is, am I doing enough? The answer is no. But I still ask myself then to see what more I can do, what I can do to try harder in most instances. It can be as simple as sharing something on LinkedIn, something as simple as if a job application opens up, sharing that through my community network. I really do get a kick out of making sure an organization is filled with Kevin soldiers, making sure that everyone I know is employed somewhere. So if job comes up, I share, hey, apply, how are you going? Apply for this job. If something, an opportunity to be on a board or a panel, I share that too. I'm like, I'll be your reference. Just tell them you know me. Just go.
Wow.
And it's had one. If I remember someone who, as soon as they said they knew Kevin, the tone changed. Not that I'm a superhero in that instance, but in that space, I was someone that was known well enough to then help the other young person get that position that they needed to get. So I ask myself if I do enough. The answer is still no. I can still keep pushing and moving the dial along and squeezing myself into tables that I don't belong. But as I said, I wish I'd moved to Australia much later and read in the quotas of other people. But here we are on the front lines. I shouldn't use that loose thing. But here we are really having this discussion about first in family, first in community, first to be whatever. We don't even have member of parliament in the lower house, in the federal, who was elected, who's been elected before. We had one that was, she got elected because someone defected or passed away, I forget, but circumstances. But we just don't really have much visibility.
Yeah.
So I should ask myself, are we doing enough to build visibility for those that come after us? Because it doesn't end with us. There's more that are coming, generations that are behind us. Yeah. And what can I do to move the dial more and continue pushing and pushing and pushing until we've pushed hard enough for there to be change, good, equitable structures that are good for community.
Amazing. Is there anything else? Last question. For those who were in our position, if they're experiencing that today, sleeping in bed, not getting up, is there anything you'd share advice to them?
Honestly, at the risk of having an influx of messages, do reach out. I really, really cannot recommend enough that I even have a friend who suffers from anxiety and depression, and I know that it's easier said than done. Reach out, ask for help, wake up. It took my mom pouring cold water on me in the morning just to get me to wake up during that time. And I was like, that's fine. I wanted that experience to be forced, because I just wasn't waking up. And my sleeping pattern changed completely. I was in bed all the time, and things weren't working well. So you want someone to throw water on you, ask for help. We'll be there to do that. I'll call, I will message, find you that high-performing group of friends who are able to help drive you and push you to do things you would like to do more of. Go outside, connect with nature, go for a walk and just forget the troubles of the world. There was a time, I say this knowing full well the consequences, where I had 5 fines, a couple speeding fines, a traffic light fine, parking fines, all piled up, and I was stressing. I'm like, just think logically. What can you do here? A payment plan, pay them one at a time, ask for assistance, put one in your brother's name. Cut that part out, but there is a way to handle stress and emotions that are overwhelming you. It's asking for help. It's, telling people around you that, hey, I'm struggling and I could use assistance here. It is, for me, through the arts component of the African community, through the Zimbabwean community, through building capacity of others, through sport, and through my mom putting water on me. So ask for assistance. I'm very, very big on, if you're struggling financially, emotionally, with work-wise, and you can't wake up and it's really gotten you, we only have the one life. Do you know what I mean? And I know there's cultures that say we've got more than one, but I only know of this one. Until I get to that next stage, I want to know. But I'm living this one now.
Yeah.
I'm a quarter way through, God willing. I'd like my next 3 quarters to be my best and most high performing ones, and it takes me pushing the dial where I am now to get there.
Amazing. So where can people find you?
Oh, I didn't prepare this part. All right. Well, I do have an Instagram, which is official Kev_K. So official, the word Kev_K. And I guess my stories can be thought-provoking sometimes, between the ridiculousness of my life, generally watching movies. Instagram is great. Just Kevin Kapeke Instagram is pretty good. We have good conversations. We share great things there. I've recently started Twitter. I think it's official Kev_K as well. But yeah, I think I'm trying to work out what platform that I can have where I can begin having these conversations with people. I get scared off Instagram sometimes or LinkedIn because I'm like, oh, it's professional. I want to say things that will rattle the boat. I want to, just saying, proud to announce I've joined a board. Proud to announce I'm employed now. So, but those are the 3 that I have at the moment. I've got Facebook, but I think we're moving past that exactly. we're Insta generation.
Yeah, amazing. It was incredible to meet Kevin, and we look forward to following your journey.
Thank you so much. This has been great. Thanks for making the space.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you.
Well, we hope you found value in this podcast. Always stay safe, always take care, and always get up. Peace.
Okiru.